This week comes to us at an opportune time as DACA heads to the U.S. Supreme Court this Tuesday at 10 a.m. This week, we'll be diving into immigration policies and how they impact us and people we work with as social workers. We'll go in depth into this subject in the following presentation.
Immigration Policy, the History. The very first law on American immigration was passed in March of 1790. Called the Naturalization Act, this law allowed only for any free white person of character who has been living in the United States for 2 years or longer to apply for citizenship. Another important act for immigration was the Steerage Act of 1819, which required better conditions for passengers arriving by ships and also required that captains provide demographic information for their passengers. This created the first federal records of the ethnic composition of immigrants. In 1875, the Supreme Court ruled making and enforcing of immigration laws to be the responsibility of the federal government. Beginnings of opposition. The American Party, formed by nativists who were anti-Catholic and anti-immigration, called the Know Nothing Party to their clandestine beginnings, were the first major third party. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was the first to place significant restrictions on immigration of a specific ethnic group. This prevented the Chinese from entering the country without significant certification from China, and also prevented re-entry for Chinese immigrants who left America and then returned. The Geary Act of 1892 extended the 1882 Exclusion Act by requiring Chinese residents to register and obtain certificates of residence. If they did not have certificates, they could face deportation. Continued oppression and restriction. The Immigration Act of 1891 stated that responsibility for immigration law was assigned to the federal government, and the exclusionary categories were expanded to include idiots, the insane, paupers and polygamists, persons responsible to become a public charge, people convicted of a felony or other crime or misdemeanor involving moral turpitude, and sufferers from a loathsome or dangerous contagious disease. In 1907, the Gentlemen's Agreement was an informal agreement made between President Roosevelt and the Japanese government to restrict Japanese immigration in order to prevent the segregation of Japanese American students. Even more oppression and restriction. The Immigration Act of 1917 created a literacy requirement that halted Asian immigration. This act would last until the McCarran-Walter Act of 1952, which would pave the way for the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. The Immigration Act of 1924 created nationality quotas that favored certain people groups and barred others. Western Europeans were allowed the majority number of visas. In 2017, executive orders to restrict travel and immigration from 6 predominantly Muslim countries, as well as North Korea and Venezuela, were issued by President Trump. Immigration enforcement. In 1924, the U.S. Border Patrol was created quash the rise in illegal immigration. Mounted watchmen had been in place as early as 1904, but their use was intermittent and based on funding. In 1940, the Immigration Service was moved from the Department of Labor to the Department of Justice and further tightened the control of the border to include the use of manned detention camps. America as a place of refuge. Displaced Persons Act of 1948 was the first law to address the needs of refugees, and it was at this point that refugees became a big part of American immigration. This act was primarily designed to help resettle Europeans who had been displaced by World War II. People admitted under this program represented nearly one-half of the 900,000 legal immigrants admitted to the United States from 1949 to 1952. Support for reformed immigration policy. More than 12 million immigrants passed through Ellis Island between 1892 and 1954. Of these, 1,004,756 came through during the year 1907. This was considered the peak of American immigration. In 1965, the Immigration and Nationality Act overhauled the American immigration system. The act ended the national origin quotas enacted in the 1920s, which favored some racial and ethnic groups over others. 7 categories of preference were created to replace the quotas. These focused on family, reunification, and skilled workers. This drastically changed the demographics of American immigrants as people began to come from Asia, Africa, and Latin America rather than solely Europe. Continued evolution of immigration policy. In 1986, the Simpson-Mazzoli Act created more possibilities for legal immigration and also introduced 2 amnesty programs that provided amnesty for more than 3 million illegal immigrants. In 2001, the Development, Relief, Education of Alien Minors Act was proposed, the DREAM Act. This act strove to address the needs of young immigrants who desired to complete their education and obtain citizenship. As of now, this bill has not yet been successful. Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals passed in 2012 and provided temporary relief from deportation for young undocumented immigrants. This act has faced many trials in the past 3 years, and no new applicants are currently being accepted.
International migration crisis. We're not the only country trying to manage migration. It's really important that we understand that migration is a need for a lot of people around the globe and between several different borders, between several different nation states. The UN defines a migrant as any person who is moving or has moved across an international border or within a state away from their habitual place of residence, regardless of the person's legal status, or whether the movement is voluntary or involuntary, what the causes for the movement are, or what the length of stay is. So immigration is a hot button issue in the United States, but let's remember that it largely centers around our human need for safety and well-being. Keeping in mind that the U.S.'s history on immigration, let's take a global look at a couple of the recent and current migration needs. Many people in migration are doing so because of just they're displaced by something worse than the rest or violence. Migrants can have any number of positive or negative circumstances and identifiers. A positive migrant status would be someone who can move freely between their home country and perhaps their host country, so research and work in the United States. In this section, we're going to focus specifically on vulnerable migrants. An asylum seeker is someone who is an individual seeking international protection. The countries have individualized procedures. An asylum seeker is someone whose claim has not yet been finally decided on by the country to which they have submitted it. Not every asylum seeker will ultimately be recognized as a refugee, but every refugee is initially an asylum seeker. A refugee is a person who has fled their country of origin and is unable or unwilling to return because of a well-founded fear of being persecuted because of their race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. A stateless person is a person who, under national laws, does not have a legal bond of nationality with any nation state. Article 1 of the 1954 Convention relating to the status of a stateless person indicates that a person not considered a national or citizen automatically under the laws of any state is stateless. internal displacement, or an internally displaced person, or IDP. Internal displacement is the involuntary movement of people within their own country. This movement may be due to a variety of causes, including natural or human-made disasters, armed conflict, or situations of generalized violence. One status not listed here is an economic migrant, which can be documented or undocumented. Other terms could be legal or illegal. But basically, that person is going to another country to work and make better money, send money home. It's kind of a gray area because the home country might just have a poor economy, but it also may be influenced by other factors like violence and lack of state support for the citizen. The first refugee crisis we're going to look at is the Bosnian refugee crisis. In order to understand refugee crises or migration needs, we need to understand what happened in the host country or host region. That way we know why people have to leave, why we have asylum seekers, refugees, and internally displaced people. Yugoslavia was made up of 6 regions or 6 smaller nation states. President Karadzic created a plan for a greater Serbia, which was based on ethnic cleansing. The target of ethnic cleansing were the Bosniaks, or Bosnian Muslims, also Bosnian Croats, and any other small minority group. Between 1989 and 1993, 2.3 million people fled their homes, and so then you have refugees, asylum seekers, and internally displaced people. So, in 1991, there were so many applications for asylum status that the U.S. was overwhelmed, and we actually initially declined several thousand applications because of the influx. During that time, 12,000 people were murdered. Approximately 7,500 were Muslim Bosnians or Bosniaks. Herzegovina and Bosnia had declared their sovereignty from the Greater Serbia in October of 91, with additional referendums for independence in 1992. This is when the siege of Sarajevo happened, and for a few years they had no control over their state capital. It wasn't until 1995 that the UN authorized resettlement and humanitarian aid for Bosnian and Herzegovina refugees. More than 130,000 were settled in the United States in that same year. However, like I said before, so many lives had already been lost due to ethnic cleansing and state infighting. And in 2016, more than 1 million refugees were choosing to return to their homeland after nearly 20 years of living abroad. Many were choosing and are choosing to rebuild their home in the city of Lizak, Bosnia. This was also a site of a 3-day massacre of the Muslim Bosniaks by Serb forces. On this slide, you can also read an account about the massacre. It's graphic. Below that, you'll see the music video by U2 and Luciano Pavarotti for Miss Sarajevo, which features footage of day-to-day life in a city under siege. The music video is pretty graphic, but it gives you a real visual of what it's like to live in a place where you can walk down the street and die by sniper fire.